Hey everybody, this is Melissa Chambliss again, along with Joe Schiavoni. So this is take two. So we had a little bit of technical difficulties. We were having some problems with the cell tower or something. So we were cutting in and out, and we wanted to make sure that we got this up and live. So we're going to give it just a really quick second to let everybody post this on the pages that we're posting and sharing across the state. As a reminder to everyone, we're with Together We Will, Cincinnati, Southwest Ohio. You can follow us at TWWSWOH. That's our Twitter account. And then you can also like our public page, which is Together We Will, Cincinnati, Southwest Ohio. Here with Joe Schiavoni, who is a candidate for governor for the state of Ohio. And we kind of stopped mid-live, Facebook Live with some Q&As, and we're going to get started here in just a second. I think we'll move on now to some questions on finance, budget, and some infrastructure questions that came through the site. And again, for anyone who's joined, just click on the actual video and you can ask your questions live, and we'll stop those and take the live questions, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, perfect. So as Governor Kasich built his surplus by cutting state funds that had gone to cities, townships, etc. If you disagree or agree with his strategy, I think we just kind of want to know what your stance is. What is your strategy to give funds back in fiscally responsible ways?
So if you think about how the governor has balanced the budget for the past 6 years, he has cut income taxes mostly to the highest earners, increased the sales tax, and then made cuts to local governments, local schools, to service providers. He talked about at the last State of the State that they gave back $5.1 billion in income tax cuts. They also have put in tax loopholes for LLCs to be able to pay their workers or partners of their law firm using profits rather than salary. And if you get paid with profits, then the first $250,000 is tax-free, and after $250,000, it's only 3%. $1 billion a year in lost revenue going out to people. And the Republicans will say that that's how you start up the economic engine of Ohio, is to give these folks more money so that they will invest in all of us. Well, it's ridiculous. So
it's like trickle down.
That's what it is, and they live by it, and it drives me nuts. So I'm not talking about stripping it all the way down so that there's no incentives for some of these business people, but it's really important that we have some balance. And making the investments first and then giving tax cuts second, I think, is the way to go. And so it would be about bringing some compromise to this, making sure that we invest in our kids first, making sure that we invest in our communities first, and then if you have some dollars left and you want to do some tax cuts, you want to do some incentive packages, let's do it. But there's a lot of investments that we need to do now before we could just give money back and then hope and pray that they provide more jobs. I've talked to a lot of business people that are the beneficiaries of these tax cuts, and they'll say that they appreciate the fact that they're making more money, but they haven't necessarily invested it in anything other than sitting in their savings account. And they're being honest with me about it. They're like, yeah, I appreciate the fact that I make an extra $3 or $4 grand a year, but it's not like we were able to hire more people with it. It's not like we were able to buy new computers or new furniture with it. We just make a little bit more money today.
Yeah, okay. So would you keep the Jobs Ohio? Why or why not?
No, I think we need to go back to the way that it was before with the Department of Development, where you actually had service as your number one goal, not profit. A slogan that a lot of the Republicans use is, we need to move government at the speed of business. Well, not everything's about making money. Business is about deriving profit, and sometimes service, providing service to people should be about providing service and not making money. But switching everything to this private model, privatizing everything from food services into prison to Jobs Ohio, and making sure that people are able to make money, charter schools, this is privatizing education, then you lose the focus of what you're really trying to do, because you're trying to make money first and then provide the service second. So some stuff is just better left to be a service nonprofit rather than privatization. And I think Jobs Ohio is a good example of that.
Okay, thank you. What retraining programs would you support for coal workers? if you support like infrastructure, clean energy, if you support these types of retraining programs, how would you implement and fund them?
Yeah, this is always a really tough issue when you're going and talking to people, because a lot of people have worked, and their parents and their grandparents have worked in these facilities. And so when you're going to talk about shifting your energy portfolio, you have to make sure that you give people a real opportunity for retraining and a long-term opportunity. You don't just say, hey, we're going to close down this facility and in 6 months everybody's going to lose their job. If you're going to talk about moving towards a different energy source, you have to have long-term training and real training. So getting people in to make sure that they have the skills in order to move into a different sector is vitally important before you talk about closing it all. I think that there is a way that you can have diverse energy policy that encompasses all the different ways in order to derive energy. You just have to make sure that you do it in a balanced way.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll see if we get some follow-up questions to that. We have some more Facebook Lives, but let me just finish the infrastructure and kind of budget questions here. Do you oppose regressive tax systems? And if so, how will you combat them?
Yeah, I mean, that goes to the question that you already asked.
Earlier.
I mean, the way that Kasich has balanced the budget is increasing the state sales tax and then decreasing the income tax mostly for the highest earners. That is regressive tax, right? And then what you do is you then starve out the locals, and then they have to go back and ask for levies for seniors, for people with disabilities, for roads and bridges, for schools, everything. It's ridiculous to try to govern that way. And so if you invest first, then you're not going through those regressive tax structures in order to deal with it. I mean, now local governments are now putting their sales tax on too, because they're trying to figure out a way to pay for stuff.
To pay for all the stuff that's not getting paid for anymore.
And if you think about the sales tax, that affects everybody equally no matter how much money you make. And it's unfair to ask somebody that's making $10,000 to pay the same as somebody that's making $500,000 for a new shirt for their kid. That tax is the same. And we got to make sure that we have a fair tax policy in place, one that has some real balance to it.
Great, thank you. So we have a couple more questions live. What do you think Democrats need to do to increase voter turnout? Should the party move to a more grassroots approach?
Absolutely, and that's what we're doing every day. I mean, you got to meet with people, you have to talk to people, you have to be honest with people, you have to give real answers to questions and not try to just sugarcoat them to get through the day. I mean, people want answers, so provide them answers. They want to see you, so go to the communities. If you don't do that, then you shouldn't be running for office. I don't care what party you're in. You got to put your best foot forward and do this every single day and gain the trust of people. So to answer the question, absolutely.
Do you support a $15 minimum wage? Another one of our live questions.
I think a $15 minimum wage is ambitious, and I don't think that based on the General Assembly and the House and the Senate that would ever pass. Do I think that we need to improve and increase the minimum wage? Yes. Do I think that going to 15 is reasonable? Probably not in the situation that we're facing today in Ohio. But I think moving and trying to go for a $2 increase would be some way to improve quality of life and then go from there. That would be my strategy when it comes to minimum wage.
Okay. So I'm going to move on to some questions that we got from the group regarding environment.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts on the U.S. pulling out of the Paris Accord?
Well, I think that, it shows that Donald Trump, he wanted to fulfill a campaign promise, and that's what he did. It's frustrating to me to watch that. He's obviously not listening to experts in the energy sector when we're talking about balanced portfolios, when we're talking about alternative energy sources.
Right.
And so it's really important that we concentrate on looking to the future when it comes to energy policy, and I think it was a bad move.
Okay. What actions will you take, and what legislation will you support to ensure that Ohio continues on a greener kind of path?
Yeah, I think that we have good opportunities for wind in Western Ohio, so incentivizing those companies to come here. But when you say incentivizing, you have to make sure that they're fulfilling a promise to manufacture here, to hire Ohioans to be here long term. Now, in exchange, they're going to say, well, we need to see a long-term roadmap from the General Assembly. So you have to show them that legislators and candidates for office are are buying into this. So giving those incentives to those alternative energy paths are really important, but they have to fulfill their end of the deal too, and that's staying here long term. It's a relationship that has to be built on trust, and I think right now a lot of the solar and wind folks are looking at Ohio and they're kind of taking a step back because every year the policy changes and they're not sure if Ohio's in it for the long haul.
Well, and that was one of the next questions, is kind of what could you do or what would you do to encourage more green jobs, more sustainable type jobs in Ohio?
These are good jobs. I mean, you can you have manufacturing jobs with this stuff, you have tech jobs with this, you have marketing jobs with this, so there's a lot of good jobs that come with these new ways of providing electricity and energy, but we as a government have to embrace these and show these business interest groups that we're in it for the long haul, and so there has to be some clarity there.
Okay. Good. So we're going to move on to public transportation, because I know we've had a lot of discussions here in the Cincinnati areas. I'm sure a lot of other areas that we're broadcasting on public transportation and transportation in general. So can you explain, why we invest so little in transportation across the state?
There was a point where Governor Strickland had talked about a rail, and then there was some federal money available, and Kasich turned down the federal money for the actual study to be implemented of how to link our big cities with rail. And so public transit has always been on the back burner since I started, and it's really upsetting to me to see, because it's vitally important to people having good opportunities for jobs, to when a lot of elderly folks need the ability to have that, go into the grocery store and go into the doctors. And I don't care if it looks like a giant bus, or it looks like a train, or it looks like a little car, or it looks like whatever it might be, right? Give people an opportunity to get from point A to point B based on, again, the needs of the community, not just building a one-size-fits-all public transportation system. Our state has a lot of, and I know this now because I'm heading to every community, right? There's a lot of places that would benefit a lot from train. There's a lot of places that would just benefit from more public transportation, no matter how it looks, but it may not be rail. I just think that we need to do a better job of looking at the needs of our communities and giving people that opportunity.
Well, it's interesting, I think, a lot of the conversations that I've heard and discussed with different politicians is when you kind of marry that lack of public transportation, or the fact that it takes you a couple of hours to get across town, you marry that with the fact that you have food deserts in parts of our community. Those coupled together make it even tougher.
Just another barrier.
Yeah, for our citizens to get fresh, healthy food along with transportation to get
and
there.
And then that feeds that feeling of certain groups in the state saying that nobody cares about me, right? Nobody cares about us. Nobody's there to provide us some opportunity, and we desperately need that, just like everybody else. So I think it's just about looking at the individual place and trying to help.
And so you mentioned, because another one of the questions that we had, because you mentioned the rail project, and that must have been before my time, before I moved to Ohio, but I've heard it talked about, and that was actually one of the questions from one of the groups is there any possibility for that project to get back on its feet?
At this point, where we have this huge budget deficit, that will not be a priority. And in my mind, it's something that we desperately need to do, but I think that there's investments that are needed first when it comes to our education, when it comes to our roadways, when it comes to a lot of the things that we have to do right now. I think it's a good priority moving forward, but I think it is an immediate priority, probably not.
Okay. All right. Well, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
We're going to transition on to health care. Okay. So what is your stance on Medicaid expansion and health care at the state level? And there's lots going on with that.
Sure.
Today.
So you've got to think about the feds fund a lot of the state's Medicaid expansion. And if that money goes away, then what are states going to do? Are they going to fund it on their own, or are they going to make the cuts? Now, think about what just happened in Columbus last week. Senate and House voted to freeze Medicaid expansion. Governor Kasich line item vetoed that provision. Now the House and the Senate are being called back. We're going to have to go back, and there may be a vote to override the veto. this is really important to the future of expansion in the state. A lot of people in the last 4 or 5 years have really benefited from Medicaid expansion. And we're not just talking about giving people stuff. We're talking about working poor that desperately need health care for themselves and for their families in order to live healthy lifestyles, to have a primary care doctor, to be able to go to the dentist, to be able to go to a physical therapist after a surgery, to be able to have home health care if all you need is your clothes washed and some food prepared. We need to give people that opportunity to have that Medicaid program, and if we don't, then we're just going to go back to the same situation that we were 5-6 years ago, where everybody's using the ER as their primary doc. So if we don't invest in it, and the feds don't invest in it, then that's the track we're going to go down. So I think continuing to invest in Medicaid expansion is important, and it's a fiscally responsible thing to do.
Great. So just a reminder for everybody, we're coming up probably about 10 minutes.
Okay.
We'll probably wrap. We'll wrap a little bit early,
okay.
so you can kind of finish up with just an exit. So just a reminder for anyone who has a question, kind of ask them and make sure that you ask them. We'll stop what we're doing to do that. So we've got another question that's just coming in, literally just coming in. They're typing. Is there a way to make adult education more affordable? And is there any role for state vouchers for trade education?
Yeah, I think that there is, and I think that a lot of our trade schools, a lot of the local trade schools where high school kids go in the day, using those same facilities for adults at night is a good way that we can use the same facility for different demographics in order to get people the skills they need in order to get back in the job market at a low cost. I've seen some of that across the state. Different communities do it in a different way. But a lot of people got had by these for-profit colleges, these smaller schools that said they had programming that would give them the skills necessary in order to receive some of these jobs, and they paid a lot of money, came out with a lot of debt, and didn't really get the best education and the best training. But using these technical schools, I think is the better way to do that. A lot of those smaller colleges, for-profit colleges, kind of gone by the wayside lately.
Okay. So we have another question from the Facebook Live. We have a lot of questions that we didn't even get to. So,
and if people have questions and we don't get to them, I'm serious, call my office and we can talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason why we can't do it either through Facebook or through the legislative office if it's a legislative question, and we'll just work through them.
Okay. Yeah. I'm going to ask you this question, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to shift and ask them equality questions, because I know that that's a big interest of a lot of the groups that I belong to. So what is your position on medical and recreational marijuana in Ohio?
So I voted for the medicinal marijuana bill. I think that it is a good first step to really see the medical benefits of marijuana. Right now, somebody with severe pain or a child with epilepsy is prescribed 5 or 6 different pills that really affect their health in a bunch of different negative ways. And if we can use a plant from earth to help remedy a problem, then let's do it. And so I think this is a good first step. You're going to have 12 major grow sites in the state, 12 minor grow sites, and about 60 dispensaries starting next year. And seeing how this process goes, I think, is the only way that we can do this initially, and then we'll see where we go with recreational. But at least first, medicinal is passed, and we're going step in the right direction there.
Okay. All right. So I want to talk to you a little bit about equality issues. Okay. A lot of the groups across the state, it's not only healthcare, but it's a lot of issues, inequality being one of them, in which we're really passionate about. So what will you do to protect LGBTQ people from employment, housing, and accommodation discrimination?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is an issue that every day in the State House, I've dealt with in one way or another when it comes to discrimination, not just for LGBT, but also, race discrimination and age discrimination. And working as an attorney, I dealt with a lot of discrimination issues. we shouldn't be able to discriminate based on sexual orientation, right? It's something that this state has done a very bad job of even talking about, let alone putting some legislation in place. I know there's a House bill that Representative Antonio has been pushing that I think would be very beneficial, and I've talked to the equality groups about how to deal with that and how we can really put some pressure on the General Assembly in the next year in order to get that done. I went to both the Columbus and Cincinnati Pride parades in the last couple of weeks, and I've talked to a lot of constituents about how important these issues are and how it's affected them in real life. And that's given me a new perspective and a new drive on those issues, because I could really feel, the pressures that have been put on and some of the discriminations that have taken place. And so it's really important to me.
Okay. So another question we had was regarding implementing kind of fair pay legislation. I know there are some other states that have implemented fair pay legislation that you can't ask someone. They've put in certain legislation in place to ensure that women and minorities are making fair pay in relation to Caucasian males, right? So what are your thoughts around that and Ohio doing something along those lines?
Yeah, it's difficult to legislate, but I think we should continue to talk about the issue. I know that some different states have done different things, and if you can't get it implemented at the state level, you can do it at the local level. So I know some local communities have gone forward with pieces of legislation when it's come to fair pay. But it's an issue that, again, we shouldn't have to legislate. It should just be known that the best person should receive the equal pay to the person they just hired based on qualifications, but it doesn't work all the time. And I realize that we have to do a better job of putting some safeguards in place for discrimination. And I've been working with different groups to try to develop good policy when it comes to these issues. So it's something that we have to develop a little bit more, but I think is one that we should continue to talk about.
Okay, one last equality question. Sure. So what can you do as governor to address racially based violence and aggression by our police force?
Well, you see this all the time where you have incidents where these violent acts take place. I think we have to start at the beginning, with young people and make sure that young people are being educated about what's going on with the police that are supposed to protect them, right? And having police officers talk to the families that they're working with and they're servicing every single day to develop real relationships. Cecil Thomas is a police officer from down here that is in the Senate now. And so I've talked to him a lot about this community relations policing, where you're having police working with families and communities so that you realize that you're on the same team. Sometimes it looks like it's us versus them all the time, but we have to start working together in a real way and start talking about issues. And sometimes people have some biases internally that they're not aware of, and so working through those internal biases are really important, and just talking it out. Sometimes it's a painful conversation. Sometimes it doesn't go well, but you got to keep trying, or we're just going to continue to have these incidents pop up. And then once they do, you may be coming in like this, but then you go right back out, and you go right back out to that divide. So it's important that we keep working together and we keep talking through issues.
Okay. All right. So I think we're about at time. We don't have any other live questions. So I'll just turn it over to you, and you can kind of wrap up and let us, if we didn't hit on something you want to make sure that we are aware of, something that's really vitally important to you, feel free.
This was a good opportunity. I haven't done anything like this. We do a lot of TV, you do a lot of radio, you do a lot of interaction with people online, but to have the live forum I haven't done yet. But I really like this because I'm glad that people...
Well, you're welcome back.
Well, people were engaged. This is and I will come back because people are engaged and they want answers. And so to put people that are running for elected offices in front of people on their computers, it's a good way to link people together. And I just appreciate the opportunity. And if people didn't get their questions answered, or they think about one later tonight, I have a good responsive Facebook team. And I'd be happy to meet with people individually, talk to people on the phone, work through the computer, whatever people feel comfortable with. I just appreciate the opportunity, and we'll get back to work.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yep.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you joining. Melissa here with Together We Will Cincinnati, Southwest Ohio, and hope to see you again.